Hey guys, welcome back. So for this one, we'll be covering the full story of Marvel's 2024 Blood Hunt series, which was pretty much the Avengers vs. Blade. And outside of the main story, the Blood Hunt event had a ton of tie-ins, some of which we've covered on the channel. So if you want to check those out, I got links in the description. And with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications, so you'll be notified as soon as the video goes live. And I mean, I was gonna say so we could squad up in the comments for the first hour, but for these longer videos, I wanna at least give you enough time to finish it. But either way, I'll be here. Alright, so with this jumping right into Blood Hunt, we start off with the chaos going full tilt. And that's mainly because going into this event, we begin with the countdown to Sun Death, which is a single moment where a number of Dark Force users all became portals to the Dark Force dimension and released that energy into the upper atmosphere, all at the same time, blocking out the sun, hence the name Sun Death. But prior to us seeing this now in Blood Hunt issue 1, this was shown as a bit of a teaser for Free Comic Book Day, as well as more recently in Vengeance of the Moon Knight issue 5, as a way of teasing the event while also showing us the scale of how this is happening all over the world, so naturally it's going to tie in to other series like Amazing Spider-Man, Venom, and Doctor Strange, in addition to the main Blood Hunt series and the one-shots that are coming along with it. But at this point, when the countdown to Sun Death ends, we're given a brief monologue from the person who's responsible for all of this, who we'll see revealed in a little bit. But right here they say, "This is how the world ends. This is my work. This has always been my work. And after so very long, I will complete it." Which again, that's just to set us up for the big baddie, but we'll get to that. But just after this, from here we start seeing the clock go up, where now a little bit over 15 minutes after Sun Death, we see Iron Man reaching out to Scarlet Witch as the two of them are trying to figure out what's going on, cause Tony's checking this out from high up while Wanda's taking a closer look on the ground. And right here she's able to tell rather quickly what we knew heading into this, cause as she approaches what used to be Marcus Daniels, aka Blackout, she's able to tell right away that this guy's been turned into a portal to the Dark Force dimension, as the Dark Force energy is just spewing out of him. And Tony's getting the same reports from all over, cause in other locations, superhumans like Darkstar, Dusk, Silhouette, Cloak, all Dark Force users have had the same thing happen to them. So for a moment here, Tony asks Wanda if she's able to just close them all up using her magic, so she just gives him a very sarcastic response by telling him certainly, and when I'm done, perhaps I'll go punch out Galactus. Which is actually hilarious, because for the past 15-20 years, the number of times Galactus has been killed or defeated, just to show how powerful someone else is, it's gotten out of hand. So it's funny to see just a little joke about it here, because Wanda just goes on to let him know that this is energy from an entire other dimension, forcing its way into theirs through multiple breaches, which right there makes the solution to this far from simple. But also Wanda, she's a bit petty, so she goes on to ask Tony if he can take care of it with his robot clothing. But really it's one of those things where Tony just figured he would at least ask Wanda, because he was hoping that this would just be something they could magic away. Because it's come to the point now with all this Dark Force in the atmosphere where they've lost the sun, and it's just a matter of minutes before them, along with a number of others, begin to realize that this is no coincidence. Because next, when we head over to Hunter's Moon and Tigra, they've got a front row view of this happening, because just moments ago they were going toe to toe with the Shroud, but as soon as they de-escalated the situation, this popped off. And right away Tigra sees on her phone that this is going on all across the world. And right there Hunter's Moon is like they're darkening the skies, hiding the sun and the moon. This isn't a mishap. This isn't an accident. This is an attack. And as soon as they turn around, as far as the eye can see, it's raining vampires. And from here, when we head across the globe, we're shown that it's bad everywhere. Because with no sunlight, all the vampires is outside and given free reign since the sun's no longer a problem. But we also get a look at something really interesting, because for a moment here we head over to Latveria, where we see a couple of guys racing towards the border to get into Latveria, with the two of them being chased by some vampires, and as soon as they cross the border, one of them falls, of course. But the two vampires following them, as soon as they step across that line into Latveria, they're incinerated. And this is how we find out that Dr. Doom, he's already taken precautions to secure the border, but to take it a step further, he makes sure to take care of these people looking for shelter and safety, while referring to them as his new subjects, because he knows that loyalty will stem naturally from gratitude. And as we know, Dr. Doom ain't out here doing something for nothing. And just after this, we head back to the US in Brooklyn, where we find Miles Morales killing the vampire with his bioelectric construct. And for a moment here, Miles is like, man, this is looking bad. Vampires are everywhere. man, what would Blade do? And it's right then when Blade just shows up, which in a way kind of makes it feel like Blade's been standing there for a minute, but nonetheless, he ends up telling Miles things are looking bad. But he's got a plan, and it's not just down to what he would do. So Blade tells Miles that he has something he needs Miles to do, though we're not told exactly what that is at the moment. And next, when we head over to the Avengers, who've all got vampires covering them from head to toe. But while they're fighting them off, they're trying to figure out who's behind this. But none of them have a clue, because for one, as far as they're aware, there weren't any substantially obvious events that led up to this point that would have them like, okay, well that's why this is happening. So for a moment here, they just start guessing. So Vision fills them in by letting them know that Dracula is currently unaccounted for. But Sam Wilson Captain America is just like, nah, this isn't Dracula. Because it wouldn't make sense for him to do something like this after everything that went into establishing the vampire nation. But while they're fighting off this horde, they get an emergency alert from Blade, with him telling them he's on the run, he's got information, and they need to speak. So he calls for a transport to Impossible City, so they can meet there and he can fill them in. So from here, the heroes make their way to Impossible City, which is the current sentient headquarters of the Avengers. But as soon as they get there, they know they don't have much time, because they're needed back on Earth, and that vampire attack ain't gonna take care of itself. But shortly after they arrive, Blade's truck comes in hot, followed by a psychic attack, and the voice saying, the Daywalker couldn't make it, but thank you for inviting us, Avengers. To where then next, we're introduced to the Blood Coven, who just hop right out the back of this truck. And all we really know at first is that these guys are mysterious and very deadly vampire faction, with each of them having very unique and insanely powerful abilities. And at a first glance, it would seem like these guys are being led by Bloodstorm 1, who's a clone of Dracula created by Hydra, but we discover rather quickly that even he's taken orders from someone else, and that someone we'll talk more about in a little while. But as soon as these guys show up, they're letting the Avengers have it, because one of them by the name of Unusual, he goes for Wanda, while another named Damascene is able to cut Thor easily, and after that he turns around and impales Vision, regardless of the state of his intangible synthesoid molecules. And as if that wasn't enough, when Tony steps in, another one of these guys by the name of Cruel threads his way into Tony's armor using some sort of living barbed wire. And it's just like, man, everywhere you turn, these guys are outmatched. But we learn from one of them who goes by the name of Smoke Eater that Cruel, the barbed wire one, eats pain. Unusual, who we saw attacking Wanda, eats magic. Smoke Eater, right here with all the arms and feet, eats spirits. And the last one, Megrim or Megrim, eats thoughts. So yeah, these guys are a lot more powerful than your average vampire. And for a moment here, when Bloodstorm goes for Sam Wilson Captain America, he tells Sam, Captain America, you I particularly want. You'll be a fine prize for the Master. When I turn you, you'll be our symbol then, and your species will weep. Which right there just lets us know that this is about more than just killing the Avengers. And I mean, from the outside looking in, it's kind of hard to tell. But it's confirmed even the more when Thor tells this guy, Damascene, that he can cut him, but he cannot kill him. And in response, he tells Thor, kill you? What a waste. We want to keep you. As he delivers a headshot, which once again doesn't look like the actions is matching the words. Because again, from the looks of things, it looks like they're trying to take these guys out of here. But of course, that's not what their master wants. But at this point, with T'Challa realizing that the Avengers are losing, he attempts to tell the city to do a dimension shift, only to find that Cruel has already compromised the city. So next, as a bit of a last-ditch effort, T'Challa sacrifices himself by calling for an emergency evac, starting with Captain America, which allows Sam and a handful of others to get away, while the Blood Coven's only able to take a few of them. And for a moment here, we see T'Challa tell Sam that they can't let them have the symbol, because the world will need a symbol. So of course now this has Bloodstorm 1 screaming in frustration, because he really wanted to bring in the captain. But as for this group, the Blood Coven, we're also told that this is their first outing, and it was nearly successful, until Black Panther saved half the team. But nonetheless, with Bloodstorm 1 being their field leader, in a sense, he's very disappointed that any heroes got away. And after this, we jump forward to 1 hour and 23 minutes after Sundeath, and we make our way to the Sanctum Sanctorum, with Doctor Strange and Clea, who are both looking to assemble the Montesi formula, which is a spell that'll kill every vampire on Earth. But while they're in the process of putting this together, Blade walks in, and at first he gives them props like, yeah, it's a good trick, but he goes on to let them know that they're gonna need the Darkhold for that. And prior to this, Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, she bound it to her soul. And I got a link for that video in the description in case anyone missed it. So from here, Doctor Strange asks Blade if he has any idea of what's going on here. So Blade tells him it's a vampire uprising, but this time, it's different. because they're organized and doing one big push to break humanity and put the blood drinkers on top. So he goes on to tell them they call themselves the Structure, a vampire cult that was spreading across the world before Moon Knight killed their leader. But they found a new leader, one with a plan. One, using Atlantean rituals to detonate the Dark Force users and turn them into portals to block out the sun. 2, global uprisings, mobilizing legions of mass-turned maniacs all across the globe, striking at population centers, critical infrastructure, the like. And 3, taking out the Avengers. Which right there is just kind of like, man, Blade, you just know the whole plan, don't you? But of course, hearing this, Strange and Clea, they're just asking him to make sense of it. So he goes on to tell them about the Kill Squad, the Ultra Vampires, who feed on superhuman blood, empowered by divergent philosophies of feeding on pain or ghosts or magic. And Blade even goes on to tell them, the Blood Coven is a match for the Avengers. Believe me. Or was a match. This isn't conjecture. The Avengers are down. So with hearing this, Doctor Strange is just like, well, now it's more important than ever that we assemble this formula and end this. Which right there just has Blade like, oh, so you would just kill every vampire, huh? Like, some of them are on your side, aren't they? So Doctor Strange answers like a doctor. And he tells Blade, if I must cut away a limb to save the patient, I will do it. I will accept my own damnation to save my patient, my world. And this whole time, you can see in their eyes that there's just this tension in the room. So Blade just goes on to tell Strange he finds that impressive, because he just knew that Wanda Maximoff would never cast a spell to exterminate an entire people, which right there is kind of like, I get what you mean, but depending on who you ask, some would say No More Mutants is up there with genocide. Others might say she's learned her lesson recently, but nonetheless, Blade doesn't think she has it in her. But Doctor Strange, on the other hand, he wasn't so sure about. So of course, with Blade having so many answers thus far, Doctor Strange asks him if he knows who's behind this. Is it Dracula? Like, who's the mastermind? So Blade tells him, do you want to know who put out the sun? Who released the Children of the Night? Who assembled the monsters who killed the Avengers? The leader of the Structure. It's me. And Blade just stabs Doctor Strange through his back and out his chest, which now just gives us the huge reveal as far as who's the villain for Blood Hunt. And it's Blade. Kinda. Sorta. Alright, so picking up with Blood Hunt Part 2, we find ourselves at the Impossible City, the recent sentient home base of the Avengers that is now taken over by Blade. And for a moment here, he mentions how this is a place that monsters call home once more, which is a reference to a group called the Ashen Combine, I think it was, which is a group of villains who were prisoners here at one point, who took the city from the heroes that were here before them. So yeah, this place goes back and forth quite a bit. But like we've seen before, he has a few of the Avengers here, like Thor for example, who's being drained of his god blood to feed the Blood Coven. He has Wanda Maximoff here, and T'Challa as well. Where in T'Challa's case, Blade's turned him because he has a specific mission that he wants T'Challa to do. And we'll talk more about what that is and how it goes throughout the course of this series. But just know for now, T'Challa's doing his best to try to fight against and resist the influence and commands of the Lord of Vampires. So going forward, we see Blade send out T'Challa to get his prize, and in the case of the Blood Coven, they're told to head down to Earth and find Blade's daughter, which from here sends us over to New York, where we find a woman trying to protect her 2 kids from a group of vampires who've got them cornered in an alley. But they're suddenly saved when Bloodline, Blade's daughter, steps in, which for us is how we find out that her and Dracula have made their way to New York. But as far as Dracula's concerned, he doesn't want Brielle out here on the streets trying to save any and every person she comes across. And he even tells her that she's too important to risk her life for insignificance. And I mean, it's kind of messed up, because Dracula, he really doesn't care about the everyday person, but he's also trying to get Brielle to understand that the 2 of them are vulnerable out here, and the longer they tarry, the slimmer their chances get to come out on top. But in the middle of him explaining this to Brielle, they get confronted by the Blood Coven, who's led by Bloodstorm 1, the clone of Dracula, who has evolved since they last met. But as soon as they show up, Dracula tries to pull rank on these guys by telling them to stand down since he's the Lord of Vampires. But Bloodstorm 1 just tells him no, and that Dracula's a false lord, a false king, and they serve the true lord, the true philosophy of their kind. Which again, sounds like something a vampire would say if their true leader was Varnae. But this ambush doesn't exactly go the way that the Blood Coven would have liked, because Captain America Sam Wilson, Iron Man Carol Danvers, and Vision show up to take on the Blood Coven once again. But this time, because they know what they're getting into, it tips the scales tremendously in the Avengers' favor. Cause first and foremost, right off the bat, Vision snatches up Megrim, who last time, Megrim was the one who crippled their minds so they couldn't fight. And the only reason this worked on Vision before is because his synthetic brain is so close to a human's, it can leave him susceptible to a telepathic attack. So to avoid that happening again, Vision just cranks up the cycles on his brain pattern. He literally just overclocks himself so that Megrim can't lock onto his mind. And it's pretty clever because it just leads to Vision taking Megrim up above the clouds, above the dark force energy, to catch a tan really quick. Meanwhile, back on the ground, the Blood Coven, they now have to actually face the Avengers. No mind tricks, they gotta go toe to toe and blow for blow. So this time around, with Tony learning his lesson after Cruel's razor wire made its way into his armor, he made sure this time he came back with some wildly oscillating magnetic fields to stop any bad actors from slipping into his cracks. And it turns out to work really well. But while Tony's fighting Cruel, Damascene tries to sneak up on him from behind, but he gets sunblasted out of nowhere, followed by a burst of solar energy, with Vision making his way back from above the clouds, charged up by the sunlight, though it's only a burst of sunlight for a moment. So following this, Captain Marvel, she shoots a hole through the dark force energy barrier, which then creates this huge God Ray effect, with the sunlight coming through and giving the heroes even more of an advantage. And it's around this time here where Carol, she gives this short speech, and I'm not too crazy about it, it's a little on the Pepperjack side, but she does make a good point here, because she starts off by telling Bloodstorm 1 and the Blood Coven that this is the Avengers at half strength. And I mean, really, it's less than that. But I mean, it's a good point, because imagine if Thor, Wanda, T'Challa, and the others were here. It would have been a lot worse for the Blood Coven. And really quick before I forget, because I do want to mention, because I imagine somebody's watching and thinking, well, how is Dracula standing in the sunlight? I want to say that just goes back to what we saw early on in the 2020 Wolverine series, when Dracula took Wolverine's blood and did a transfusion-like process that ended up giving him the ability to walk in sunlight, because outside of that, I don't recall anything changing or taking that away. But nonetheless, when this happens, Bloodstorm 1 tells the Blood Coven to book it. And Sam Wilson, he's not feeling that, so he goes after them. But Carol stops him and she tells him they'll take the Impossible City back and they'll save their friends. But obviously, just charging in there without a plan, and that ain't the move. So following this, they make their way to see Doctor Strange. And aside from this, we're also shown Tigra and Hunter's Moon, who are fighting off a ton of vampires, when they're suddenly met by Miles Morales, who overheard them saying that they're going to see Doctor Strange for help. So for a moment here, this really just ends up overlapping with what we saw in Doctor Strange issue 15, with the minor addition of us seeing the conversation between the three of them on the way, where in that case, it was really just Miles saying that he didn't know where Doctor Strange's house was. So of course, Tigra had to clown him for that. And Hunter's Moon doesn't say nothing at first, but later on he tells Miles that he didn't know either. And I mean, really, I could see something like this going either way, because on one hand, it's not their neck of the woods, but on the other hand, it's the Sanctum Sanctorum, my guy. Like, that's gotta be one of those locations that are already filled out in Google Maps. But either way, like we saw, when they get here, Doctor Strange is already in ghost mode, so he explains to them what happened just before they got here, and also why his body is a mindless, bloodthirsty vampire, who they haven't quite figured out what to do with yet. So yeah, this is what brings Dracula and the others over to what we saw in Doctor Strange issue 15. So now each group can fill in each other on what they know about this whole situation. But as soon as everyone gets here, we get this moment where Brielle, she's happy to see Miles, because for her, this whole situation's been like a shock to the system. So it gives her a moment where she's able to see a familiar and friendly face for a change, since recently Miles teamed up with her and her dad back in Miles Morales issue 11, which, come to think of it, perhaps wasn't too recent. But as soon as Miles sees Brielle, they notice that something's not quite right with him. And the reason why is because Miles is a vampire, where in this case, this is something we're shown more of in Miles Morales issue 21, by way of a flashback that goes back to Blood Hunt issue 1. So I just see it as one of those things where it's like, you know, why not mention it now? Because back when everything first kicked off, when we saw Blade approach Miles and tell him that he's got a plan, but also there's something he needs Miles to do for him, well, now we see how exactly that conversation went. Because at first there was a bit of small talk with the two of them catching up, but as this continued, Blade started moving closer and closer to Miles, to where eventually Miles was just like, okay, well, what exactly do you need from me? So Blade's like, before I tell you, I'm gonna need to change your perspective. Which then just causes Miles' spider sense to go on the fritz, but he doesn't realize that Blade is the threat until it's too late. So Blade ends up catching Miles slipping and biting him on the neck, to where from here there's a brief fight between the two. Miles even whips out the biokinetic sword, but even still it's one of those things where Blade admits that Miles has gotten better at using the sword, and for a minute it's like Miles is kind of feeling himself since he's going toe to toe with Blade. But Blade just calls him out for being a bit too cocky, because without a question, if they continue with the swordplay, Miles is just not going to be able to keep up. And aside from that, Blade, he's really fast, and I think most casual fans don't really pick that up, and I mean perhaps those who have seen the older movies. But yeah, he's insanely quick. And I mean, it's not to the point where Blade's gonna open up in the next movie talking about, "My name is Eric Brooks, and I'm the fastest man alive." No, it's more of an explosive speed, and this ends up catching Miles off guard. But this flashback ends with us seeing Miles getting ready to hit Blade with a venom blast, before it goes back to the real-time events. But I mention this here because much like we saw earlier, when Blade sent T'Challa on his mission, and he sent the Blood Coven to find his daughter, it's here where we find out that Blade's secret mission for Miles was for him to go after Brielle as well. And it's caught everyone off guard. Alright, so starting out with Blood Hunt Part 3, I first want to point out, now that we're back to talking about the main event, there are a few things in here that jump ahead of the tie-ins, and I assume for the reason of not spoiling what's in the main series, but because this is heading into the huge reveal of what's really going on with Blade, and how that's supposed to be this huge secret the whole time, it creates this pacing issue where the main event seems to be happening a lot faster than what the tie-ins are allowed to reveal. Because there's about 15 tie-ins between Blood Hunt issue 3 and issue 4, and another 15 issues before Blood Hunt issue 5. So even though I waited about a month to cover this one, everything still ain't quite here yet, and I'm fine with that. But I just want to let you guys know ahead of time that there are smaller details that'll be explained at a later date. And I mean, that's even if those small things are significant enough to even talk about. But nonetheless, Blood Hunt Part 3. To start this out, we head back to the Sanctum Sanctorum, just after it was revealed that Miles Morales is a vampire. Cause just when he attempts to go after Brielle Brooks, Vision tries to stop him and he catches the Count Chocula. But this attack doesn't last that long, fortunately, because both Clea and Strange are able to restrain Miles and use the Eye of Agamotto to open his eyes, so the true Miles can come to the surface before things really got out of hand. And I mean, right here it has me thinking a couple things, cause one, mindless vampire Miles Morales is terrifying if you really think about it. Cause for one, in that state he was still using his bioelectricity, so God forbid he started using the camouflage and the bioelectric constructs. That would have been a real problem. But when Miles snaps out of it, so to speak, he tells Brielle and the others that he told him to hunt for her, and Miles couldn't fight it, he had to do it. And Dr. Strange tells Miles that he did the same to Strange, showing up as a friend before he attacked, which understandably has Brielle confused, because everyone here is just saying he without mentioning who he is, which leads to Dracula dropping the bomb on her and letting her know that they're talking about Blade. And Dracula even takes it a step further here to explain why Brielle is so significant in all this. And he mainly tells them it's because with Blade being the new Lord of Vampires, and I put air quotes on the word new, because we know at this point that it isn't actually Blade, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But at this point, Dracula tells them with Blade being the new Lord of Vampires, he's engineered the darkening of the skies, he's loosed his legions of the night all over the world, he's broken the mighty Avengers, and Brielle is all that's left to stop him. She's the last of his bloodline. So that's why the Lord of Vampires has sent out the Blood Hunt, with her being his only weakness. So Dracula tells Brielle, aka Bloodline, that it's gotta be her hand that strikes Blade down. So of course she's like, no way. And some of the others like Tigra are quite skeptical too, because this is advice coming from Dracula, president of the Vampire Nation. But Dracula assures them if this Lord of the Vampires succeeds, then his vampire nation will fall just like any and every other nation in the world. So much like anyone else, he has plenty to lose here. But while these guys are going back and forth on whether or not they should listen to Dracula or even what they should do next, Brielle just takes off. And Miles just tells Dracula like of course she did, cause you just told her she needs to strike down her own dad. Like, do you really expect her to believe that coming from you? And Dracula responds like, don't lecture me, Spider-Man. But Miles cuts him off right there. He's just like, shut up. I gotta go look for her. So Miles races after Brielle to make sure she's okay, and Dracula goes after her too, because he believes Brielle's the key to all of this. But what this ends up doing, really, is taking us back into tie-in territory, because with Miles and Dracula leaving, this picks up in Miles Morales Spider-Man issue 21, where they catch up with her for a little bit, Dracula starts to lecture her, and she dips on them again. And as for the others, Tigra and Hunter's Moon request to be sent away. Because the Midnight Mission, they have their own plan as far as what to do about the vampires, which goes along the lines of bringing their own army to this fight. And as for the other Avengers remaining here, since they know storming the Impossible City is just not a good plan at all, they decide what they should do instead is lure Blade out. So in the meantime, while they're waiting for the reinforcements of this army, Carol Danvers comes up with the idea of sending out a broadcast that'll give the people hope while also daring Blade to make his way down and attempt to break that hope. So Tony sets up the broadcast, and Sam Wilson, Captain America, gives the speech, which gets broadcasted everywhere, hitting every Blood Hunt tie-in near and far. But for the most part, he talks about how they've all faced evil a number of times over, whether it was the Kotati in an event that no one cared about, or it was Null, who took the scenic route to reach Earth. Man, Null was coming for a long time. Pause. But amongst all of this, Sam gives a number of examples, whether it was Empire or King in Black, Secret Empire, the arrival of Galactus, any of them. But out of any of these examples, when evil wanted to party, the world came together and told it no. So Sam encourages everyone to do the same here. They're gonna avenge the dead, protect the living. And when it comes to the new Lord of Vampires, if he wants their home, he'll have to fight for it. If he wants their world, he'll have to take it. And if he wants their blood, he'll have to pay for every drop. But in summary, I will say it was a good speech. Sam hit every point that he needed to, and he even managed to slip in that taunt Carol was talking about. But after giving the speech, Carol's like, hey, that was perfect. But Sam, he's completely honest, so he lets her know it's what T'Challa told the Impossible City back in Avengers issue 5. So Sam's just hoping if he could hear it, he'll recognize it. While Tony's just hoping that the speech did what it was supposed to do, as far as getting the Lord of Vampires to come after them. And following this, Carol sees a bright object light up the sky, and she responds to Tony like, look, I don't know if it did it. I know Blade. More than anything, he's cool. But that thing up there, wearing his skin, whatever it is anything but cool. So where from here next we head back to the Impossible City, where at this time a very frustrated Lord of the Vampires is continuing to give his orders to Blade, who's recently discovered the location of his quote-unquote prize, which as it turns out is the Temple of the First Blasphemy, aka the Temple of Varnae, as it's translocated and dropped right in the middle of New York City, since the new Lord of Vampires just really didn't like Sam Wilson's speech. So he decided to speed up his plans and drop his temple in the middle of Central Park so it can stand tall as if it were the hero's tombstone. So now with the Temple of the First Blasphemy being brought to New York, this creates the mile marker for Blood Hunt Part 4, and it's here where we get our big reveal. Because as Blade and the Blood Coven make their way into the temple, they're met by T'Challa. And as they do, Blade starts talking real crazy, asking T'Challa things like, do you have any idea how long it's been since I've walked these stones? And it's right here where T'Challa picks it up, because he's like, you're not Blade, are you? Like, wait a minute, to where then he gets the response, no, I am something much greater, and I will become greater still, Black Panther. This has always been the plan. Do you see? This has always been the work. Thousands upon thousands of years ago, what was begun with the crime against the universe will see completion here and now. When I was born for a second time in a stone sarcophagus, drowned in blood, which at this point just has T'Challa like, okay, what are you? And he's given the response, I am Varnae, which I know, it's really not much of a surprise at this point. And I mean, it feels like I've been waiting weeks for the official moment where it was shown so I could say, hey, okay, look, there it is. So yeah, just to be clear, this whole time, Blade has been possessed by Varnae, the first vampire in Marvel Comics, who is also the original Lord of Vampires in Marvel Comics. And I feel like I gotta say in Marvel Comics for the both of those, because there's gonna be some diehard vampire fan in the comments who's gonna be like, well, actually, I've been serving Beelzebub for the past 400 years and alright, whatever. But after this, we make our way to Strange and Clea, who've made their way to Latveria to seek help from Dr. Doom. And come to find out, unlike everyone else, pretty much in this whole story, Doom already knew this was the work of Varnae. And it's funny how he just tells Doctor Strange and Clea that it was pretty obvious. Like, what, y'all don't watch DopeSpill comics on YouTube? What's wrong with y'all? But no. He goes on to tell them that years ago, a person by the name of Marie Laveau prepared Blade as a host for the spirit of Varnae, because the Daywalker's unique constitution made him an ideal vessel. And we're also shown how what Doom mentions here is referencing Blade the Vampire Hunter issue 5, when Varnae initially tried to take Blade's body, which didn't work the first time, because after Varnae's body was destroyed, he was brought back from the ethereal plane, and he only had a short window of time to put himself into Blade's body. So back then, Blade, he pretty much just ran the clock and kept Varnae at a distance until Varnae eventually just ran out of time. But with Doom bringing this up to Strange and Clea, he just mentions that last time Varnae failed, but clearly this time he didn't, so here we are. So next Steven asks Doom about how to get rid of the dark force energy that's blocking the sun. And Doom tells him he already had precautions for this because it was practically a matter of time before someone attempted to use dark force energy on a massive scale. So it wasn't that much of a surprise to him. And with Doom saying this, Clea then asked, what do they require to fix this? So Doom tells her, an assembly of mages to begin with, a grand array of magical creatures, brought together as one. So right there, Doctor Strange is like, hey, I can just call in the Strange Academy, that's no problem. Only to have Doom tell him there's no need to, because he already did. Which right here, this is more so explained within the Blood Hunt Strange Academy tie-ins, where Doom made his way out to recruit them. But as this continues, we come to find out this isn't all that Doom needs, because there's one last itty bitty little thing. Because that last itty bitty little thing that Doom needs is for Doctor Strange to hand over the title of Sorcerer Supreme. And I mean, we knew that was coming, because we saw Doom's reaction when Clea became Sorcerer Supreme. And following this, next, for a brief moment, we see Tigra and Hunter's Moon make their way to Asgard, so they can break Khonshu out of jail. And I mean, it could be just me, but it feels like Khonshu's been doing some serious time. But at this point, breaking him out of this Asgardian prison, this plays a huge role for the planned solution of the Midnight Mission. And following this, when we go back to Varnae, we find him explaining to T'Challa how he was there thousands of years ago in the old Atlantis, transcribing the Darkhold, putting its bleak words to paper for the very first time. And it was there when he took the first step of becoming what he will be. And he goes on to explain how the next stages of this evolution will involve him using both Wanda Maximoff and Thor Odinson. Because when Varnae first became a vampire, when he took part in creating the concept of what a vampire is, the vampire itself was only the first step. Going forward, as he goes on to drink Thor's blood, he tells T'Challa, I was destined for something more. I was destined to be the end of all things. And as he's saying this, the different glyphs all over the temple, they start lighting up red, to where next Varnae calls for the dark force to come to him. As he goes on to say, I am become one with the darkness, an entire dimension of darkness. I am become the dark that consumes the light, the cold that consumes the warmth. I am become a vampire that consumes entire planets, entire stars. I am become the unliving dark force. And with seeing this, T'Challa, he turns to the side like, yeah, okay, then what's that? So Varnae and the Blood Coven look up to see a bright full moon shining in the night. And right after that, these portals just start opening up all over the world, where out from them comes an insane number of former Fists of Khonshu, who have all been deceased for some time. Which right here just lets us know that the Midnight Mission's plan was a success. Because now not only do they have their army filled with fists who have no blood, but on top of that, leading this army is the resurrected Moon Knight, Mark Spector, who's jumping in like, yeah, y'all killed me in my own series, but I'm back. So now with Moon Knight showing up with his army, this doesn't have Varnae worried because he believes that it's already over. But following this, when T'Challa pulls out one of the spikes from Damascene, Varnae also catches him, with Varnae believing T'Challa still had no control of his actions. But it's here where T'Challa reveals to him that the heart-shaped herb has been fighting his infection, healing him bit by bit. And when he grabbed this spike or this blade, this wasn't him going for the kill, but instead he was removing it from Thor's forehead so he could get back in the fight. So now not only is T'Challa revealing that he's nearly fully recovered, but also he's got Thor back in the fight, followed by the arrival of the other Avengers, who were hoping that the Lord of Vampires would make his way down so they could bring the fight to him. And Varnae, he welcomes it, because now that he's achieved his unliving Dark Force status, he's ready to throw down. Alright, so coming back, the first thing we do is head over to Latveria, where Doctor Strange and Clea made their way to see Doom to get his help, and mainly because Doom was able to keep Latveria free of vampires when the Sun Death popped off. And as it turns out, when they get here, they find out Doom already has a solution, which on one hand involves the students of Strange Academy, who Doctor Strange didn't know were here. And so prior to this, we talked about how some of this came about, so I won't spend too much time going back into all of that here. But long story short, when the students overheard Doctor Strange talking to Dr. Voodoo about using the Darkhold to save the world, they took it upon themselves to try and help by finding the Darkhold first, which led them to Madripoor only to find out that Darkhold was a kid, where in his case he's neither good or evil, though that's all he's been used for thousands of years. And now that he's in a human form, he's curious to learn about more. But as of late, Agatha Harkness just wanted to use him for more darkness. But after meeting Darkhold and learning his story, it was here when the kids found out about the Montesi formula, which is the Darkhold spell that Strange wanted to use, which would kill all the vampires. But after the kids learned what the Montesi formula was and what it would do, they didn't want to use it because it would kill all vampires, both good and evil. So right in the nick of time, Doom showed up to tell them that the Montesi formula is not the only way, because he knows of another. So for the kids of Strange Academy, with them being here, it's because they agreed to help Doom save the world as long as it didn't involve them wiping out a whole nother species. But in order to do what needs to be done, Doom tells Doctor Strange that he needs to hand over the title of Sorcerer Supreme, so he can save the world, of course. But with how this is all lined up so perfectly, it has Doctor Strange saying he's right. Well done, Doom. You've outmaneuvered me at last. But then Strange is like, tell me, did you engineer this entire crisis just for this moment? Has this all been your design? And of course, there's no response from Doom here. But Clea remembers how pissed Doom was during the Strange series after the death of Doctor Strange, when Stephen left Clea with the title of Sorcerer Supreme. And Doom was hot because you're not supposed to be able to just hand it over to whoever you want. So even now, Doom doesn't know how Strange was able to pull it off. But at the time, Doom told Clea that it wasn't over. So ever since, we knew becoming Sorcerer Supreme was a high priority for Doom. But to go as far as to say that he definitely engineered this crisis, that part remains to be seen. But following this, we head back over to Central Park, New York, at the Temple of the First Blasphemy, where we find the Avengers taking the fight to Varnae and his blood coven. And as we do, one of the first things we see here is Vision free Wanda, since she was the last one of the Avengers being held captive, aside from Thor, who was recently freed by T'Challa. But after freeing Thor and getting free from Varnae, T'Challa gets snatched up by Bloodstorm 1. But fortunately, Captain America Sam Wilson's able to jump in and help him out. So T'Challa tells him thanks for the help and the speech, which was able to reach T'Challa like we saw in Blood Hunt Part 3. And following this, Thor faces off with Varnae, and Thor admits it's been 1,000 years since they've last met, which right there is a reference to Marvel Comics Presents issue 63 from 1990, which feels like 1,000 years ago, for real. But it was back in this issue when Varnae initially introduced himself to Thor, when at the time in what would later become Roanoke, Virginia, Thor answered the prayer to a woman who said that her people had become unclean and soulless. And when Thor got there, he looked inside of the shelter nearby that was consecrated to his worship, only to find half of his people dead and the other half vampires. So this led to Thor taking on Varnae to avenge his people. But when Thor called down lightning on Varnae, Varnae took it like a champ. And really, it wasn't until Thor took to the skies and created a whirling vortex, which was practically a huge portal in front of Varnae that had the surface of the sun on the other side, which was an insanely OP move. But the light coming through was enough to burn Varnae and chase him away. And after Varnae left, Thor destroyed the last of his people, who were converted to vampires. And we find out later that there were some who survived, where in this group it included the woman who prayed to Thor in the first place. And even though Varnae was defeated, with them all being vampires, they claimed Varnae as their master, and they went out into the world to share his gift. So yeah, with Varnae seeing Thor now, he sees this matchup as one god facing against another. But with Mjolnir still up in orbit, it's gonna take the hammer a while to get back to Thor. So for the time being, Thor is forced to fight Varnae without it. Meanwhile, with the other heroes, at this point, Tony, he's telling Wanda to go ahead and use that Montesi formula. But Wanda, she refuses to do so because she's not about to wipe out an entire people again. And as Wanda's looking away, Bloodstorm 1 rushes Vision and he tears his arm off while telling the heroes humanity's what's made them weak and that's what's going to prevent them from getting the victory. While Bloodstorm and the others left their humanity or their weakness behind a long time ago. Meanwhile, back in Latveria, Doom lets Strange know that the Avengers have engaged Varnae. Khonshu, who's been freed from Asgard, has sent his Moon Knight army around the world, but none of this will be enough. So in response, Doctor Strange tells him, "You say your aims are noble. Prove it. Prove that I can trust you with this power, that I've been wrong about you. I want your oath, Victor. I want your word. Once the world is saved, You will return to me what's mine. So Doom tells him, you have my word, the word of Doom. Which to me, for a moment here, seems like that scene out of Inception.
How do I know you can deliver? You don't.
Because Doctor Strange has to take a leap of faith here. Or at least he believes that he does in this moment. And even with Clea telling him not to, Doctor Strange does it anyway. Because like Doom said before, saving the world is what the Sorcerer Supreme is supposed to do. So Strange ends up giving Doom a fragment of his living soul for Doom to bond to his own, which is the same way Stephen made Clea Sorcerer Supreme at the end of Death of Doctor Strange going into the Clea series, which Doom didn't know prior to this point. So for a second here, he's like, that's how you did it. I had always wondered. But nonetheless, when Strange is done, it works, and Doctor Doom is now the Sorcerer Supreme. But the thing that makes this crazy, and Doctor Strange is probably going to kick himself in the ghost butt for this, but the thing that makes this crazy is the fact that Wong and Bats were able to get Doctor Strange's body back in the Blood Hunt tie-in that takes place in Doctor Strange issue 17. So had Stephen known this information a little sooner, he might have been able to figure this out after seeing Doom's plan involve the children of the Strange Academy. But even still, it's one of those things where time isn't on their side. So in a way, Strange is kind of forced to trust Doom and believe that he's going to keep his word. But following this, we then head over to Manhattan, where we find Bloodline, Brielle Brooks, Blade's daughter, alongside of Dracula, where now after the Blood Hunt Dracula tie-ins, she knows that her father is possessed by Varnae, and that this wasn't just some trick from Dracula all along. So now she's ready and willing to do what needs to be done, since she's the only one who can free Blade with her being of his bloodline. And for a moment here, when Miles shows up, he's kind of like, oh man, so you're really gonna do it. You're going to go after your dad? And Brielle tells him, you don't understand, Spider-Man. I'm the only one with the power, so it's my responsibility. So right there, Miles looks at her and he's like, you don't know much about Spider-Man, do you? Of course I understand. And I mean, he doesn't say it exactly like that, but he ends up joining her and Dracula as they make their way to Varnae, who at this point is just strangling Thor with the Dark Force. It's bad. But like we saw at this current time with Thor calling back Mjolnir, the hammer eventually shows up, knocking Varnae back. But much like we saw before, Mjolnir and Thor's lightning aren't enough to stop him. So next, Tony tries to get Carol to blast a hole through the sky, much like she did before to get them some sunlight, only for her to tell him that that's no good, because the Dark Force is too thick where they are, so her blast wouldn't be able to get through. So to help the others focus on Varnae, Vision lets them know that he'll use the solar energy he has left to hold off the others. And as soon as he says this, Moon Knight shows up with his own version of a on your left moment as he leads Khonshu's army in to join the Avengers. And right now, back in Latveria, we find Sorcerer Supreme Doom explaining to Strange what he discovered and how he's going to use it to get rid of the Dark Force barrier across the world. Because like he mentioned before, he saw this threat as an eventuality. Because the magic used to create the breaches to the Dark Force dimension, it's pre-fall Atlantean and extremely old, a spell penned by the same hands that inked the Darkhold in those dark days. So he tells them, to wit, this is powerful magic that we seek to undo. The Latverian Archaeological Trust has rescued old Atlantean knowledge and artifacts from around the world, which right there kind of has Strange like, you mean plundered. So Doom continues by saying, a difference of opinion, Stephen, because he don't call him Doctor Strange no more, he just Stephen now. But no, Doom says, a difference of opinion, Stephen, and I have used that knowledge to discern a way to unravel Varnae's right. Human, Faultine, Fairy, Weird Worlder. I will weave the many colors of our magic together in an act of wizardry never before seen. I will lead our ritual. I will focus our efforts. I will save the world. All I request of you is everything. But as Doom is weaving everyone's power together, we head back over to the Avengers only to find out that they are not doing well. The Blood Coven have regained the upper hand and Varnae is seconds away from victory. And it's mainly because everything they're hitting him with is just getting swallowed up by the Dark Force. And Wanda even points out, to Varnae's advantage, he's drawing from the power of an entire dimension. So the amount of power he has access to is just insane, and he's only growing stronger. And Varnae can't help but to point out the fact that he only had one weakness, the girl Bloodline, and she's not here. Only for him to then hear a little voice come from up above saying, no, I'm here. Just as Dracula drops Bloodline, and she stabs her father through the chest, only for Varnae to let her know that it's too late, because he's had possession of Blade for too long, So this body is as much of Varnae's as it is Blade's. So even though she is of Blade's bloodline, she is now only half the solution. But as soon as Varnae says this, Miles comes through. And he's like, how about the both of us? Since this version of Varnae, who's just as much of Blade as Blade is of him, turned Miles, this has Miles like, well, that makes me your bloodline, and effectively the other half to that equation. And when this happens, Doom's aware that Varnae's concentration is broken, so he takes this opportunity to strike and reverse the breaches to the Dark Force dimension to rid the world of the Dark Force barrier and take the access to this power from Varnae. And when this happens, it's really a group effort here. Everyone's playing their part one after the other, because now when the Scarlet Witch sees Varnae weakened, she's able to give him that last push and free Blade and capture Varnae before he gets away, which effectively brings Blade back to his normal self, though he's barely alive. So Carol tells Sam and Thor to go check on Vision and Moon Knight, while Tony and T'Challa make sure that Blade doesn't die. So in the larger picture, with Varnae defeated, most of the world is saved, because Carol points out it's still nighttime for the other half of the world. But as the heroes are gazing upon the sun, Miles realizes that it's the sun and he's looking at the sunlight. And Dracula tells him the sun has lost its sting. It would appear that our people have a new dawn ahead of them. So right there, Miles is like, oh god, our people? So Dracula tells him, like it or not, Miles Morales, Varnae's blood runs in both our veins. But now, for the first time, the children of the night need not fear the day. Which right there just tells us that the vampires are entering a whole new chapter. But right now over in Latveria, we get this hilarious moment because Doctor Strange is like, that was an incredible piece of magic, Victor. And Doom is like, thank you, Stephen. But then there's like this awkward silence. And then Doctor Strange is like, your promise, Victor, your oath, return to me the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme. And Doom just kind of looks at him and he doesn't say anything. So Strange is like, your oath, Victor. And Doom is like, yes, my oath, to surrender the office of Sorcerer Supreme back to you once I save the world. And I have only just begun, Stephen. Doom does nothing halfway. Now, let me show you what it means to save the world. And I mean, really, heading into this, we knew that this was coming because it had been set up for some time. But furthermore, when Doctor Strange made Doom Sorcerer Supreme, we knew that there wasn't no way he was about to just hand that back over after Varnae was defeated. And I mean, it's not like Doom lied, because he truly believes that he's not done saving the world. But as soon as he gets Strange out of the way, a priority broadcast goes to every screen across the planet, coming from Doom with him saying, the vampire threat is over. In this world, our world is safe once more. And you have but one man to thank, Earth's new superior Sorcerer Supreme, Victor Von Doom. Which from here will lead us into the next crisis, One World Under Doom. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.